At least 550 protesters were arrested for various offences during the EFF mass action yesterday. Thousands of the party's supporters, individuals and other organizations flooded the country's streets to demand the resignation of President Cyril Ramaphosa and an end to load shedding. The National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure says the offences committed include public violence, intimidation, theft and attempted looting. Gauteng recorded the highest number of arrests, with 149 in the Northern Cape, had 95 rather, 80 for the Eastern Cape, and the Free State saw 64 people arrested. Nat Joint spokesperson Atlinda Mate says over 24,000 tyres were confiscated. Okay, let's speak more now on the utterances of the leader of the EFF, characterizing what they are doing as a revolution of sorts. So what is a revolution? We're now joined by sociologist Trevor Ngwane. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. What is the nature of a revolution?
Thank you for having me on your program. A revolution is about taking power, mostly state power, and effecting fundamental social transformation. So usually we call this a social revolution, where you overthrow, the people who are running the state, and then you replace them with others. But there's a distinction between a social revolution and a political revolution, although they are closely related. Political is when you only change the personnel. So you replace, say, President Ramaphosa with President Julius Malema. Whereas a social revolution would mean the working class getting rid of the capitalist bosses and taking over the banks, the mines, the land, the farms. Would call that a social revolution.
Is it an event or a journey, rather? So when you speak of the social revolution, that speaks to the structural issues that persist, for instance, in South Africa. Is it an event or a journey? If it is a journey, how long does it take?
Yeah, it takes a while to build up towards a revolution. So one could argue that if EFF wants a revolution, their shutdown was, let's say, the showing shorts, or if it was a meal, it was the starters. And then they have to build their forces, because to be successful in a social revolution in particular, you need to win the maximum number of the social forces you want to mobilize. So you'd need to get the support of, a big chunk of the working class. So it does take time. But when it happens, it happens in a moment, because suddenly the people who are in power are removed and new ones take over. But even then, there is a post-revolutionary period. Often things go wrong there, because you must now build a new state, and then you might make mistakes. So it does take a bit of time.
I think it was Themba Goti who mentioned that there's a need for a change in South Africa because the First Republic is not working, so there's a need for a Second Republic. Let's talk about that time in between when the transition happens.
Well, firstly, it depends which political party leads the revolution, because this is a question of state power. So at the moment, the African National Congress is in power. So if you are going to have a revolution, even a political one, you'd have to remove the ANC and put another political party in charge. In this case, of course, it would be the EFF, because that's what we're talking about. And then the EFF would have to introduce new policies which are in line with its revolutionary aspirations and promises to the people. For example, we know the EFF is strong on land, so it would have to nationalize the land, I would add, under workers' control. It would need to nationalize the bank, take the banks away from the hands of Oppenheimer, of Motsepe, and the state runs the bank. It would have to make sure that, a massive amount of the country's wealth is redistributed. So this means, attacking private property. It also means, of course, attacking, what we inherited, apartheid geography. So we who live in Soweto would have to be liberated and be able to go and live in Sentin or wherever, we are allowed to live, rather than being trapped in shack settlements, rural villages, and townships.
How has that worked for other parts of the continent, especially when it comes to the material change in people's living conditions, where you do nationalize, but it translates to the ground, and it just doesn't stay here at the top only?
Yes. So what happens is, like I said, it depends also on the party in charge, but it also depends on the mobilization of the working class, of the masses themselves, how strong they are. I mean, the ANC took power on the back of a mobilized working class in South Africa. The workers here, township people, they fought, they faced, apartheid monster. But when the time came for the ANC to take over, the masses stepped back and allowed ANC leaders to run the show, and they're running it the wrong way. If you look in Africa, in Mozambique, Samora Machel tried to institute socialism, except that his version was more top-down, but also he was undermined. Mozambique was undermined by the apartheid regime.
Mr. Ngwane,
because they... Yes.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. That's all the time we can afford.